Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. Now he was also saying to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and this manager was reported to him as squandering his possessions. And he summoned him and said to him, "What is this I hear about you? Give an accounting of your management, because you can no longer be manager." The manager said to himself, "What am I to do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig. I am ashamed to beg. I know what I will do, so that when I am removed from the management, people will welcome me into their homes." And he summoned each one of his master's debtors, and he began saying to the first, "How much do you owe my master?" And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, "Take your bill, and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, "And how much do you owe?" And he said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, "Take your bill, and write 80. And his master complimented the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it is all gone, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. The one who is faithful in a very little thing is also faithful in much, and the one who is unrighteous in a very little thing is also unrighteous in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true wealth to you? And if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, who will give you that which is your own? No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth.
ABC Part A. Ask questions. 1. Is this manager a positive or negative example? 2. If you were the boss, would you hire someone like this? 3. Bad people may still have good qualities, and good people can have flaws. What strengths does this manager have that we could actually learn from? 4. Why do you think the interest on oil was so much higher than that of wheat? 5. If this kind of accounting fraud happened today in Hong Kong or the United States, would the boss be able to report it to the police and have the manager arrested? 6. Think carefully. Under Jewish law back then, would the boss report this manager to the police? 7. What kind of further shrewd traits did this manager have? 8. In this parable, who does this manager represent? 9. Likewise, who does the master represent? 10. Why did someone accuse the manager of wasting the master's possessions? 11. From Luke 16:9 to 12, can you identify 4 adjective pairs that contrast heavenly versus earthly things? 12. Do you think Christians can get into the kingdom of heaven with a lying flat attitude? Lying flat attitude means putting in no efforts. Discussion Mode 1. Talk first. Watch later. Total time, about 60 minutes. Step 1. Discuss the questions in small groups, around 30 minutes. Step 2. Watch the video. During the video, take notes and write down parallel scripture references, around 30 minutes. Discussion Mode 2. Watch and pause for discussion. Total time, about 75 minutes. Step 1. Play the video. When a question pops up, pause and discuss. Step 2. After discussion, resume the video. Write down parallel scripture references. ABC Part B. Bible story with parallel scripture references. Question 1. Is the manager a positive or negative role model? Let's discuss this a little.
Luke 16:9. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of unrighteousness, so that when it is all gone, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings.
What does it mean to be a positive example? It means we're supposed to follow his behavior. A negative example is the opposite, someone whose actions we should avoid. But in Luke 16:9, look at Jesus' words. I say to you, Jesus, that's the I, is clearly speaking to his disciples. That's the you. And what does he tell them? To learn from what this manager did, to make friends using worldly wealth. So, shockingly, this dishonest manager, who basically cheated his master, is actually held up as a positive example. Even though he was unrighteous, we can still try to appreciate certain qualities in him. Jesus says there's something we should admire and learn from here. So, let's look at him from an appreciative angle. Question 2. If you were the boss, would you hire someone like this? It's no right or wrong answer. It's for open discussion only. From my experience discipling people in Hong Kong, most bosses there would not hire someone like this. They'd say, this guy's too cunning. He'll stab me in the back. But in some developing countries where I've done missions, I've met local business owners who actually would hire someone like this. They think, this guy's clever. He can help expand our interpersonal network and close deals. Question 3. What strength does this dishonest manager have that we can admire?
Luke 16:2. And he summoned him and said to him, What is this I hear about you? Give an accounting of your management, because you can no longer be manager.
Let's take a fresh look at him, not just from a critical angle, but try from an angle of appreciation. From this, we see the manager had foresight. He knew he was about to be fired and began thinking ahead. What should I do next? How should I secure another job? That's strategic thinking. He had foresight.
Luke 16:3. The manager said to himself, What am I to do, since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, I am ashamed to beg.
Here, we see is his sensible self-assessment. It is a kind of prudent self-awareness. He knows he's not strong enough for manual labor. He's also too proud to beg. Successful people often have this kind of self-awareness. They know their own limits and strengths. People who understand their limits and strengths are much more likely to find the path for reaching success.
Luke 16:4-5. I know what I will do, so that when I am removed from the management, people will welcome me into their homes. And he summoned each one of his master's debtors.
The third quality, he knows how to build human relationships. By cutting debts, he's giving favors and making friends who might help him out later. He gets how human relationships work, and he's playing the long game. Like the saying goes, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Luke 16:6-7. And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, Take your bill, and sit down quickly and write 50. 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, Take your bill, and write 80.
Last but not least, he knew how to seize opportunities. Back then, companies didn't have strict exit policies. So even though he had already been fired, he still had access to the business records. And during that short transition window, he used the time wisely. cutting debtors' debts, collecting favors. In today's world, especially in big corporations, when someone gets fired, they are often escorted out immediately. They often can't return back to their office desk again. But in smaller companies, there might be some time left for a transition period, and that's the kind of transitional window this guy took full advantage of. Question 4. Probable historical background. In the Jewish world at that time, lending oil had about 100% interest per year. Lending wheat had only 20 to 25% interest per year. Why was the interest on oil so much higher than on wheat? Why the big difference? Let me clarify. The question wasn't about the price of oil versus wheat, but about their interest rates, i.e., how much extra you had to pay back if you borrowed them. The interest rate of oil was so high because hardly anyone wanted to lend oil. Lending oil was a risky move. Why was lending oil so risky? Lending oil was dangerous because of the physical properties of oil. Oil separates from water. Oil is always on the surface of the water, so dishonest debtors could easily dilute it with water, or mix in water, animal fat oil, or even gutter oil. And back then, there weren't reliable testing methods like we have laboratory today. It was hard to detect such frauds. When there's less willing to lend out oil, its interest remained high, even reaching 100% interest rate per annum. Wheat, on the other hand, was easier to verify. People at that time were mostly farmers and knew what good wheat looked like. So the risks of lending wheat were lower, and its interest didn't need to be as high. Question 5. If the manager committed this kind of fraud today in Hong Kong or the United States, could the boss report him to the police? Well, first, let's make sure we understand what his crime was about: falsifying the financial accounts, i.e., with intention to alter what was owed to the master. In today's legal system, especially in places like Hong Kong or the United States, if there's solid evidence, the boss absolutely could call the police and press charges for such fraud. But let's not stop there. To really understand this parable, we should also take a look at the legal background at the time, specifically Jewish law.
Deuteronomy 23:19. You shall not charge interest to your countrymen, interest on money, food, or anything that may be loaned on interest.
So, Jewish law strictly forbade charging interest to fellow Israelites. Now, let's revisit Luke 16:6-7 again.
Luke 16:6-7. And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, Take your bill, and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, And how much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, Take your bill, and write 80.
So, what was the manager actually doing? Cutting down the debt, probably by the amount of interest that had been illegally added. That's the key. Question 6. But under Jewish law, would the boss report the manager to the police? This is where the story gets really interesting. In the parable, after the boss found out what the manager had done, his first reaction wasn't getting angry, but instead, He praised him.
Luke 16:8. And his master complimented the unrighteous manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light.
Wait, what? Instead of getting angry, the boss praised the guy for being clever. Let's break this down. In the story, the victim is the master. The wrongdoer is the manager. Repeat, the victim is the master. The wrongdoer is the manager. But the crazy part? How come the victim praises the wrongdoer? For how cleverly, shrewdly, he harmed the victim himself. Why didn't the master go to report to the police? Because here's a twist. If he had, he would have been the first one to get in trouble. Remember the Jewish law? You're not allowed to charge interest to fellow Jews. So, if you sued the manager for reducing the debts, the court might have asked, wait, were you charging illegal interest in the first place? Which means the manager was actually exposing his master's shady practice. The boss knew that. And that's why he didn't dare take legal action.